Hey, good day, I'm Ray, and this is God Talk. Thanks for joining me tonight. Tonight we're going to have a look at the question, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Not that Nazareth. Lots of good came out of that Nazareth. That's one of my favorite bands I grew up with. No, I'm talking about the ancient city, Nazareth, or the ancient little town in Israel, and it's still there today. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? We're going to find out. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? You know, we read that phrase in the Bible in John chapter 1, verse 46, and it is referring to a conversation Nathanael is having with Philip. Philip is inviting him to come and meet who he believes is the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth. And Nathanael responds by saying, Nazareth? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? There is very little we know about Nazareth. The town is rarely mentioned in the Bible except for the ministry of Jesus. In some commentaries, they describe it as being a very insignificant, tiny little place of about 150 to 200 people. To me, a place that size and as unimportant as what the commentaries indicate does not deserve the reputation that precedes it. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? If it's just about being small and insignificant, then one might say, Nazareth, whatever happens in Nazareth. Meaning, it's just a little boring place. To insert the word good, however, seems to suggest something else entirely. Nazareth may have been small, but I don't believe it was at all insignificant. You know, through a bit of research, I discovered that this phrase was not just a Jewish saying, but was one that was also supported by the Romans. Digging a little deeper, I found out that only 4 miles north of Nazareth, in the time of Jesus, was the largest city in the Galilee region called Sepphoris. It was a very wealthy city, which meant high taxation and overarching Roman presence. Herod's son Antipas was given the city upon Herod's death, and until AD 19, it was the location of one of his palaces. Josephus called it the Jewel of Galilee, and Sepphoris is rumored to be the birthplace of Mary, the mother of Jesus, and both of her parents. In 4 BC, there was a vast messianic uprising against Roman occupancy in the area. Roman General Varus acted quickly by burning most of Sepphoris to the ground and capturing the terrorists. 2,000 Jewish rebels were found guilty and crucified along the road from Sepphoris to Galilee. Now, in lieu of all this turmoil, it's logical to assume that Nazareth and surrounding areas probably earned its reputation by harboring some of the rebels before and while the rebellion took place. It may have even been the place for terrorist training camps to assist in the uprising. In the aftermath of the rebellion and partial destruction of the city, Sepphoris underwent a massive rebuilding project and hired many local contractors. You know, there's reason to believe that Joseph and his son Jesus were among those walking the 4 miles to work every day until the city was finally restored. So I don't believe Nazareth was this insignificant, sleepy little bedroom town that many people say it was. Not with that kind of reputation. It's a possibility that the story Jesus tells about the Good Samaritan may have been loosely based on a true story, considering the corruption present in the area. Yet there is another hypothesis concerning Nazareth, that Jesus, the Messiah, was not the only radical visionary to come out of that little place. There was another, and his name was also Jesus. Having the same first name would not be their only likeness. They both became leaders with many followers. They both wanted to free Israel, one from the bondage of sin and the other from the bondage of Roman oppression. Now, if this theory is correct, there is a good chance they knew each other. And well, they may have even grown up together and studied under the same rabbi. However, although their lives together as youngsters may have been inconsequential, they would soon reunite in a most significant way. Now, before we talk more about this other Jesus, we're going to digress for a moment and turn to Leviticus chapter 16, verse 7 and onward. Let's read it. Then he must take the 2 male goats and present them to the Lord at the entrance of the tabernacle. He used to cast sacred lots to determine which goat will be reserved as an offering to the Lord and which will carry the sins of the people to the wilderness of Azazel. Aaron will then present as a sin offering the goat by lot for the Lord. The other goat, the scapegoat, chosen by lot to be sent away, will be kept alive, standing before the Lord. When it is sent away to Azazel in the wilderness, the people will be purified and made right with the Lord. Now, that was the sacrifice for the Day of Atonement. It was a ritual performed only once a year by the high priest, and its purpose was for cleansing the tabernacle. Part of the ritual required the high priest to take 2 goats and cast lots before them. Although it doesn't go into detail in the Bible, in early rabbinic writings it stated that the goats had to be identical. They were chosen at the same time, they had to be the same age or size. The allotted goat to the Lord was then sacrificed as a sin offering. The other was to have the sins of Israel pronounced over it and then driven into the wilderness outside the camp to Azazel. In some Bible translations, instead of the name Azazel, they use the term scapegoat. However, this is a mistranslation of the Hebrew. Azazel was actually a demonic entity. And in the book of Enoch, Azazel was one of the chief watchers who rebelled against God and descended from Mount Hermon to procreate with humans. In the book of Leviticus, it's uncertain who exactly Azazel is. Whether he is the devil or not, it doesn't say. But he clearly is an unembodied, rebellious spirit. In the purging of the tabernacle, God was giving this unholy entity the garbage, the sin of the people. In a way, he was saying to this devil, you want worship from my people? This is what you get, their sin. You want their children to be sacrificed to you? Sorry, ain't gonna happen. Here's what you can have, their rebellion, their iniquities, and their filth. Keep it out of my temple. Although the goat was called the scapegoat because it escaped from being sacrificed, it was far from an actual scapegoat because it was driven out into the desert where there were no life-sustaining resources, and it would eventually die. In later times, it would actually throw it off a cliff to its inevitable death to make sure the sins of Israel would never find their way back. This ritual was basically God hitting the reset button in his tabernacle or temple, and once again making it a clean and beautiful place where his presence can dwell. Now let's fast forward over 1,000 years to the reunion of these 2 visionaries. Here we have 2 radical revolutionists whose meeting was not only inevitable, but ordained in the likeness of the Day of Atonement in the tabernacle. Let's have a look at Matthew chapter 27, verses 16 to 26 in the New International Version. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, which one do you want me to release to you, Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah? For he knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed Jesus over to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. Which one of the 2 do you want me to release to you? Asked the governor. Barabbas, they answered. What shall I do then with Jesus who is called the Messiah? Pilate asked. They all answered, crucify him! Crucify him! Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him! When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. I am innocent of this man's blood, he said. It's your responsibility. And all the people answered, his blood is on us and on our children. Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Could the whole scapegoat ritual have been, in fact, a foreshadowing of this very day? Remember, 2 goats had to be brought to the highest authority to pronounce judgment. In the time of Moses, it was the high priest. In the time of Jesus, it was Pilate. However, it was the high priest who originally pronounced Israel's sin on his head. Blasphemy. Both had the first name Jesus. Again, they might have been from the same town, that little town that earned such a horrible reputation, where nothing good resides. Jesus, the Messiah, was known as the Son of God, or the Son of our Heavenly Father. The name Barabbas has a similar meaning. Bar means son of, and Abba is father. So you have Jesus, Son of the Father from Nazareth, and Jesus, Son of the Father, possibly also from Nazareth. The Messiah is the sacrificial goat that dies for the forgiveness of sin, and Barabbas is set free. However, in this case, the sacrifice is so sufficient that it never has to be repeated. It completely pushes the reset button all the way back to Eden. The sacrifice is eternal. All sin and iniquity are purged from the temple of God. His sacrifice cleanses and prepares this sacred space for His presence to reside forever. We are those temples. When we accept Christ, all our rebellion, garbage, filth, and dirt are removed and gone forever. It's a complete default reset. The veil that separated the most holy place from the rest of the temple was torn in two. This not only signifies that man and God are reconciled to the same sacred space, but that's what a Jewish father did when his son was killed. He'd tear his garment from the top to the bottom and say, "My son is dead." What about Barabbas? What about Barabbas? Well, Barabbas was set free. But was he really free? Like the scapegoat, he escaped the sacrifice. But unless he accepted the gift of the Messiah, he would forever carry around his own sin and guilt and belong to Azazel. Barabbas was free to choose, as we are free to choose. Free to choose which Jesus we will follow. Shall we follow the Messiah in self-sacrifice that leads to life, love, and peace? The one who repairs the sacred space inside so that heaven can enter us. The one who grants us a complete reset of eternal life the way it was supposed to be in the first place. Or shall we follow the Jesus of self-effort, which leads to vengeance, bitterness, always striving to achieve what will never last the test of time, where peace and comfort are only temporary and are contingent upon getting what we deserve in our own minds? To us, it's a no-brainer. When we look at the world, we can see who the majority wishes to follow. When we see the rioting and agendas of the political movements, all in the name of peace, if you can believe it, we know which Jesus they chose to follow. Peace can never be attained by self-effort, but by the one who is peace himself. And unless all men choose to follow this Jesus, there will be no peace. You know, maybe that reputation that preceded Nazareth was true, that nothing good could ever come out of Nazareth. I believe that may have been the difference between the two Jesuses. Barabbas was probably born in Nazareth, but we know the Messiah was born in Bethlehem. Maybe we're like Nazareth. Nothing good can ever come out of our flesh. That's why we need Him to enter us. Remember, we cannot get to heaven unless heaven first gets to us.